And good afternoon to the Dutch mentor. We are again here at our Lunch and Learn series. Today's topic is around strategic planning. In the Academy, we are transitioning now into the Team Operational Rhythm program and to think about it not only as an opportunity to get the team engaged around problem solving, but also to start thinking about your responsibility as a leader in strategic planning. Too often it is thought that the strategic planning takes place in the C-suite only, and that they will put out a 3 to 5 year plan. Although certainly with COVID, we have learned that these 3 to 5 year plans went out of the window, and we changed more to planning for 6 to 12 month cycles, and frequently make updates to that because the environment around us has changed so significantly. What I will do is an introduction today around strategic planning on more at the departmental level. So each one of you as a leader carries some responsibility to always think about opportunities and thinking about the future. As we talk about dialing to the right, in that circle where we have 4 quadrants of doing, we have improving, which likely will occupy most of your time, and then we have opportunities and future. Again, strategic planning fits, squarely in the middle of that, and some time should be spent as a leader into that category. So we'll talk a little bit about the strategic management process from a high level. Talk a little bit about you forming your own mission and vision statements for your department. This is also called a team concord, how you can bring together a unified statement, a unified vision for your department. How to use analyzing strategic drivers and core competencies. That goes back to when we talked about leading with confident humility and looking at partnering in the right people in the right roles. Is about understanding that who the people you lead are, what their competencies are, and how you can mix that and match them for the absolute best possible outcomes. And of course, looking for gaps that you need to fill as a leader. We'll talk a little bit about the SWOT analysis and then scenario planning, or what we call modeling. The SWOT analysis, I will not go too deep into it because that will be a tool that over the next weeks to come, we'll take as a separate subject because it is really, really powerful if it's utilized correctly. So the strategic management process, the steps that we're taking, is about defining your business, right? Defining your department itself. If there's no clear definition, it really is difficult to communicate out what your department does. As I've worked with all of the students in the academy around developing your personal why statement, right? Is it why do you come to work and what and how? It is also true for your department. What is the why for your particular department? So you can start working on those things. How to perform external and internal audits. It sounds more complicated than what it is, but that's really having a review of current systems, but also outside systems, right? What are others doing in order to stay ahead of the curve? I always go back to the same example because it's so very, very powerful. Blockbuster, right? If they were clearly defined as the first franchise, the fastest growing franchise to be able to provide VHF and beta and DVDs to the public, but they dropped the ball by not spending enough time on external audits and reviews, right? And because of that, Netflix essentially took over. They were in a position to buy Netflix at one time, and they passed that up. Translate the mission into strategic goals. This is where you go from having that unified vision, knowing and understanding what your hospital or your organization wants from a high level, that's that North Star, and how you can then translate that into goals, define goals for your department, which then goes into your scorecard. Generate and select strategies to each of the strategic goals. Here it is the A3 thinking that we have been talking about where you're working on your projects, is to actually take the goals, or what we call the why, right, the target statement, and understanding the X's that influence that outcome, and how can you be in that cycle of continuous improvement. Implementing, and that is the team operational rhythm we talk about, when we start implementing existing process and start measuring it, or new process and start measuring it. In order to have success, remember that the failure rate is as high as 80% of new initiatives. strategic initiatives fail 80% of the time. Why? Is because we don't implement it to an extent, and we don't stick with them to coaching and supporting for an extended period of time to create these new normals. So it's really, really important to have an understanding of that. And then the back end is to continuously evaluate the performance. And that's, again, the scorecards come into handy. So here's a more of a roadmap of a comprehensive strategic management model. Again, I'll post this to all of you so you can take a little deeper look at it. Just remember, there's more than one way of doing it, right? There are many roads lead to Rome. This is just one of the models that really understands feedback, right? It is the voice of the customer, both internal and external, having a strategic planning and formulation cycle, an implementation cycle, and then an evaluation cycle. And I think that the areas that we tend to go wrong is the second and third, both the implementation on how we do it, right? Instead of telling people what to do, we want to lead through context or get through buy-in, right? We need to spend time on that area. And then how we follow through on that. That is, we are not very good at following through. The ask is, why is that? Because as soon as you're done with one implementation of a process, there's always another one and another one after that. And healthcare is notorious for that, both from a regulatory standpoint and from a process standpoint, that we always seem to be getting something else that needs to be done. But we don't spend enough time to hardwire the behaviors that we seek in order to be able to deliver the end result, whatever that may be: safety, quality, engagement, growth, cost containment, or transformation itself. So start off with having a vision and mission statement. In team operational data, we'll talk a little bit more about building that team concord, where you want your team to come together. So this is not something you do to them. You could bring your team together and create that elevator speech just for your department. Starting off with that why, right? Looking at the attributes that your team stands for, that they can buy into. It's almost like in Team Concord, and I've done that in my previous organizations, that once we have committed to that, we all sign off on that. Because that's when you really have that intrinsic commitment. And if I'm willing to sign it, I'm that much more willing and likely to do it. Right? So the vision statement really tells people where we want to go and what we want to become and what we want to accomplish and why it is important. The mission part of it is the purpose, business, and values portion of it. So try to think about that as you go through this exercise over the weeks to come of building this team concord for your particular department. At the end of the day, the goal is to have that right on the top of your huddle boards in a very public way that represents your brand, that represents your elevator speech or your mission statement for your particular department. So here are a couple of examples that we can talk about. Apex Elevator, to provide a high reliability, error-free method for moving people and products up and down and sideways within a building. Right? It is, how strong is that? Well, in high reliability, error-free. Right? I'm willing to pay for that. So think about that for your own department, right? What are the key attributes that you stand for that? I'll beg to say that Christine in the pharmacy probably has a much higher level of error-free environment because of the dire consequences if something goes wrong versus maybe somebody like Juan who is doing discharge planning and care management, all very important, but the level of commitment, of error is different. So your statements can be the same, right? You have to come up with what is unique to you for your brand. United Telephone Corporation update to provide information services in local exchange and exchange access markets within its franchised area, as well as cellular phone and paging services. In 2 sentences, they essentially we can lay out their vision and their mission, right? It is that, and then you can read the third one for yourself. So let's look at it, another one of the strategies in brief. So the company American Online, right? Strategic principle is the consumer connectivity first, anytime, anywhere. Interesting. AOL. I still maintain an account with AOL. I think I'm one of the original. I won't let go of it just for nostalgia wise. But again, it shows you that if you don't stay with the market, right? If you don't stay with the future, if you don't, make continuously change into what the market demands of you, especially going with who your consumers, right? Millennials are very different from Gen Zs. The world around changes quickly. Dell, be direct. It can be more clear to the point. eBay, focus on trading communities. General Electric, be the number one or number two in every industry in which we compete or get out. One thing, remember, they used to be in every single appliance. Jack Welch came around and took a really hard look at it. Is listen, if we cannot be great, we need to get out. And they get out of a lot of things. Interesting enough, we think of GE as an engineering company, right? Today, GE Finance is a much larger component than even their radiology component or their healthcare component, or that's a very a large second place. Southwest Airlines, interesting enough, the only U.S. carrier that has been in positive numbers on the P&L for I think 41 years straight, right? To meet the customer's short-haul travel needs at fares competitive with the cost of the automobile travel. Interesting promise, right? Mission. Well, if they wanted to deliver that, they have to be different. And we're going to talk a little bit about how they have been different in order to meet that expectation. Walmart, low prices every day. Walmart is a large corporation. I think they have like 245,000 people who work for them in the United States. There was a real threat for a period of time that Amazon was going to hurt them. It wasn't until they changed the way they thought about, instead of having just large anchor stores throughout the country itself, they too needed to go to this online delivery model, and they had a lot of catching up to do. It's no different if you think about Microsoft or Edge or Chrome or Google as search engines. Right? Google was so far ahead of the competition. The first thing people think about a search engine is Google, not the others, right? So it's imperative to make sure that we are sharp and we have taglines or brief, mission statements that are deeply meaningful to you and can be repeated, right? That should be squarely in the middle of your huddle boards in the future. How to test for quality of your strategy. Does your strategy fit with what's going on in the environment? It is forever changing. You need to be changing, right? It's a living model that we're in, especially in healthcare. Does your strategy exploit your key resources? Right now and into the future, will competitors have difficulty keeping up with you? As leaders of the future, you want to be at the leading edge of the wing, not the trailing edge of the wing. Right? We want to be in it, just like we say, we need to spend time doing, we need to spend time improving. We're looking for opportunity, looking into the future. That's how you stay ahead of the competition. Right? And in healthcare, where our profit margins are razor thin, it is exceptionally important to always continue innovation. But don't look at others for them to innovate. Bring the creativity out of your team members and see how you can drive that performance to a different level, right? Are the elements of the strategy internally consistent? Are they aligned with what the CEO and the C-suite is asking of you? Right? Don't go left of right of that, because that's kind of a waste, and you end up pedaling upstream. Do you have enough resources to pursue the strategy? Use your SMART, right? Is it specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely? And can your strategy be implemented? That goes again with the SMART piece of it. Again, there's a lot to think about here, but it is important as a leader that you take these things into consideration, so you end up, staying ahead of not only the competition, but for your people. There's nothing worse than seeing the world around you change, and that your team members feel like they're falling behind. That's an opportunity for you to lose your talent, right? For people to move on. Real brief here again. This is just what we just talked about, the relationship between strategies and multiple business firms, right? We have to think about how we can align. So each one of you is responsible for a business unit within a larger business unit. Alignment to make sure that we are working together Remember that partnering is about oneness. It is about not only in your department, also in other departments. And not while you're sitting in the middle of my screen over here, your department is reliant on working with all departments in order to get the ball across the line. It's no more. You can start a new vision for your department, but if it is not aligned with the output that the others desire, it's all for nothing. Right? So we have to go back to this all of the time. What is our true North Star? What do we need to do? Right? So we have corporate strategy and we have competitive strategy. Right? Corporate is on that level, and you see this now, especially in healthcare, where lots of small community hospitals have now been absorbed either as affiliate hospitals to leverage, purchasing power, or sometimes even absorbed as part of the new system. They have a corporate structure, and then they have a local structure. Right? You have vertical integration happens, throughout diversification, status quo, investment reduction, an alliance and joint ventures. Now, the good thing in New York, we don't have any allowance for for-profit entities, because otherwise that would bring in a venture capitalist and strategy on the corporate level. It's a whole different ball of wax, right? In New Jersey, you can, and some other states. Competitive-wise is that we cannot take for granted that we're the only one providing a service. So we have to keep an eye on that too, right? Are we, a cost leader? How are we differentiating our service? And sometimes it comes down to how we treat our patients, right? The patient satisfaction. That's why all organizations look at your engagement and patient satisfaction scores on really should be done on a daily, weekly basis to stay ahead. The leapfrog letter score is very important to people, right? That Joint Commission recognition for specialty services is something that you want to aim for. Right? That helps you differentiate. It also makes sure that we have focus. We can't be everything to everybody all of the time. So interesting model here is these 5 force analysis from Michael Porter that you can talk about in your particular department itself as well. Maybe I'll do a separate lesson on this instead of dwelling on it now too much, because it really takes more than just 5 minutes to explain this. But it is a very powerful tool for you to understand on where you should be situated, right? I'm sure that when there's strategy sessions on the C-suite level, they look at this model all of the time. You too can look at this, is that to get a better understanding of what it is you should focus on, especially going into the future, right? Strategy is about forward looking, about what is 6 months, 12 months, 3 to 5 years ahead. If you work in a specific, like a radiology department, what is next coming our way that we need to be prepared for, so we too can be on the competitive, leading edge. We can certainly bring this up in some of our one-to-one conversations. Here's an example of a strength, weakness, opportunity, and threats. So this is a SWOT analysis. Again, this is a tool that we will I'll do a separate session on between now and the end of the class. Again, you can use a SWOT analysis for just about anything that you experience in your workplace. You can do a SWOT analysis on the right people, right roles. You can have a SWOT analysis on your strategy. You can have your SWOT analysis on your implementation program or any process that you have. This is a really good opportunity to use to get a deeper understanding of the functionality of the process that you're trying to implement itself, right? You have to learn to see where you have potential strengths that are offsetting to the potential threats and weaknesses, right? So you can overcome those, and so you don't lose your competitive edge in that sense. Again, more to come on that particular tool in a very near future. So there's simple worksheets that you can use in order to be able to scan the environmental section, both on the macro and micro level. Here, it is important to have a communication with not only your internal team, but also your external team. So you could bring in somebody from the C-suite who does strategic planning, or from finance who does for budget planning itself, and have a brainstorming session around what it is that is impacting your business cycle today or into the future. Right, and that really should be done on a micro level. so within your area of direct influence, as well as the macro area on the total overarching healthcare environment as it relates to your specific department. So how to benchmark, right? It is that how can I establish what the why should be? Is that, we have to focus on specific problems and define it carefully. Here we have to be careful that we don't want to boil the ocean, right? Focusing on the things that matter most is how you get to an end. So more is not better in this case, right? Focused approach, no different than all the things I'm asking you to do in your scorecard, is that find that priority number 1, 2, and 3 that will have the greatest impact on everything else. Strategic planning is the same way. You cannot open up 5 different departments and be good at it, be great at it, right? If that's the goal. Use your employees who will actually implement the changes to identify the best practices. Engagement of your front line creates early buy-in. And don't forget the saboteur or the late adopter, right? That overt naysay, non-compliant person. Get them be part of that. If you work in a heavy union environment, if you're going to think about change processes or altering job descriptions, work with your HR department or labor relations to get them engaged as early as possible. If they are part of it, they're more likely and more willing to adopt to new standards. By be willing to share the information with others, that's sharing best practices. Avoid sensitive issues such as pricing, and don't look for new product information. Again, that goes to more specificity. And of course, work with in a circle of confidence, right? It's really important that when we meet with our team members to talk about the future, to not lose your competitive edge by your competitor finding out, right? Corporate espionage is still a real thing, not just China spying on us. This happens between companies all of the time. One way of doing that is when you have these types of strategy sessions for your department, you can start off with the rules that you use in AA. Is who you see here, what you say here, let it stay here. It's one of the commitments as a team you make in order to maintain both confidentiality. You want people to feel comfortable to speak up and participate. So we don't have titles in those types of interactions. We might have a facilitator. We don't have a boss per se, right? Because otherwise people are going to be reluctant to participate in conversation. Here's another model of a matrix. I'll send this to you so you can take a look at it closer. Again, you can Google it and find. So this is the Boston Consulting Group, BCG. These are very well-known consultant group out of Boston. They have offices, worldwide. And they developed a very interesting planning tool where you can look at, what does the marketplace hold today, right? Is the market growth rate high or low? Seems to be pretty simple, easy enough to find out. It also challenges you to think about what is your relative market share, right? So if it is low growth and low market share, these are cash cows. Right? If you have relatively market share that if you have high market share and low growth, cash cows, if you have market share that is low, so you have a bare minimum, footprint, and the growth rate is low, those are dogs. Meaning, if you identify a department or a project that is in this particular area, sometimes you have to be pragmatic and just dump them and move on to the next thing. Don't hang on to the dogs. That's really what BCG is talking about. But you have to go through this analysis. What you want to find is high growth and high relative market share, right? And that is something that is not that easy to do, because otherwise everybody would be doing it. Going through strategic sessions, planning cycles on a frequent basis with your own department in support of the overarching strategic objectives of the organization is one of your responsibilities as a leader to do. Here are some planning principles on how to go about doing it. Again, my suggestion is that you use the same principle of having a basis of bringing people together into a room, having a brainstorming session, If you've never done this, try to find a facilitator of the process itself. The key thing to success is to have open dialogue, to be open-minded. And remember that 9-dot exercise we did? Allow people to think outside of the box. Right? It is really important that as you start thinking about the future, you think beyond what is normal to you today, right? You can always take that back. So here's the example I was talking about, Southwest Airlines. Most airlines are traditionally set up, and strangely enough, they just mimic each other as what we call hub and spoke models. They have hubs throughout the country, and all of the planes that they fly have to go from one hub to another hub. And they then fly, they fly very few direct flights from small airport to small airport. Southwest Airlines did a deep analysis of what the customer is asking of them. And they said, listen, we're going to do concentrate on two things in the company. One, we will only fly one aircraft. So they have 1,000 aircraft. They're all exactly the same. They're all Boeing 737s. Every single aircraft, they might have a slightly newer model, but these are all 737s. They have no Airbuses, no 67s, no 777s, just 737s. Why is that? Because that gave them the ability to very quickly switch out aircraft, repairs, inventory levels. All these things made more sense in order to keep the airplanes flying. The second thing they did is they took a low-cost approach and offering direct point-to-point service with no seat assignments, right? And you can look at the screen of all the things that they were able to hold themselves to. Of course, one of the biggest decisions that made as leaders, and because they stayed ahead of times, is they leveraged low fuel cost at a point in time where they hedged the fuel cost, which allowed them in the time that the fuel cost rose double, triple, that they still were paying at the bare minimum that the market held at that time. So again, they were continuously using the 5-quarter analysis in order to be able to stay ahead of the competition itself. It's a really good Harvard Business Case review. Will be interested in reading itself. Leveraging and looking at your core competency, knowing what you do really, really well, and then explore that as you continue to go forward is a key to your success. Of course, on the flip side, knowing what you don't know is equally as important. Okay, so this is a mouthful of strategic planning that we covered in the last 25 minutes. Again, we can certainly talk about all these things in our one-to-one sessions a little bit more as we go over the next couple of weeks in our team operational rhythm. It is about having the right people in the right roles, identifying the gaps of knowledge, skills, and abilities so we can close that. Making sure the next time you have an opportunity to hire somebody, that you hire the right team member, not just anybody. It is about getting the team together and work on that unified vision. Right? That you can use these tools to come to that end. And then we'll talk about having the meaningful metrics, the cadence of accountability, and then how to take action. And that is the evaluation and the continued evaluation of the process you put into place to ensure there's sustainability, growth, and high performance. So I hope that you found this to be helpful. There's a quick insight of the responsibility as a leader to be part of the strategic planning cycle. In the last two sections of the academy, we'll talk a little bit about finance and your role in financial planning, which is too often done for you, and that there's not enough engagement or involvement of departmental leaders. Again, the knowledge is power at that point in time. And does anybody have any questions? Let me turn